First, let me just say, Mr. Hoyer, our whip, talked about the 50th anniversary this year of President Johnson's War on Poverty. Now, this War on Poverty included such initiatives as Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, the Higher Education Act, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. There was a very important immigration bill, you name it, 50 years ago. This legislation, the War on Poverty, really has helped to reduce our poverty rates in the United States. Poverty has fallen from 26% in 1967 to 15% in 2015, yet we have a long way to go. So it's not time to end this war on poverty. Actually, it's time to increase our efforts to make sure that the 47 million people living in poverty have access to all of these initiatives that were begun 50 years ago that really have lifted families out of poverty and have prevented families from moving into poverty. That is very important to remember about this 50th year anniversary. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, for example, SNAP, that has kept nearly 5 million Americans, including 2.2 million children, out of poverty in 2014. That's why we do not want to see any more cuts to this program. Social Security benefits kept 1.2 million children out of poverty in 2013. And Medicaid kept nearly 3 million people out of poverty in 2014. And programs beyond the war on poverty, like the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit, which Congresswoman DeLauro and our Whip Hoyer spoke about. These two initiatives, these two policies and programs have kept nearly 10 million Americans, including 5 million children, out of poverty in 2014 alone. They strengthen our economy, these programs. They increase opportunity for families and provide millions of Americans with pathways out of poverty. We've tried to make sure that our Republican colleagues understand these facts and not gut these critical programs because they're extremely important. We do not need to continue to fund tax breaks and giveaways to corporations and the well-connected while so many people are still living below the poverty line. Stealing aid to the poor and handing more to the rich, that's really shameful and that's utterly unacceptable. And so we need to come together to really begin to recognize that we've got to lift people out of poverty and create a level playing field so that everyone can have the opportunity to live the American dream. Cuts to these programs not only cost our government more money, the taxpayers in the long run, but it's really morally wrong to cut these programs. Now, as a former food stamp recipient myself and public assistance recipient, I know firsthand just how important these safety net programs are. I would not be here today if it were not for that lifeline, that bridge over troubled water that these types of programs extended to me when I was a single mother on welfare, raising two amazing sons, trying to get my life together so that I could move on and take care of my family and live the American dream. Believe me, I know. No one wants to be on food stamps. No one. Everyone wants a good paying job that allows them to provide for their family and contribute to society. They want to take care of their kids. There are bumps in the road? Yes. And now the economy has turned around for many, but not for all. So that bridge over troubled waters, that's now more than ever. So I hope that in the negotiations in this omnibus bill, we're going to make sure we remember these people and not raid the programs that keep people out of poverty, provide a safety net, and as Mr. Hoyer said, let's do no harm in this bill, and let's help people move into the middle class. We must recommit ourselves to combating poverty and inequality once and for all. It really is a disgrace when you look at these charts, when you see the percentage of people living below the poverty line. And this is in the wealthiest and most powerful country in the world. It's a challenge to all communities. And communities of color, of course, are disproportionately impacted and affected, but American Indians, Alaska Natives, African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders, whites living below the poverty line in Appalachia and rural America. There are people living in poverty all over the country. I come from California, and close to 17% of the population of California, mind you, California is living in poverty. That's almost 2 percentage points higher than the national average, and that is in California. While many people believe that poverty only touches cities and urban communities, as our whip indicated, our rural communities continue to be plagued with persistent poverty, while lacking many of the resources found in cities, such as public transit, food banks, access to critical workforce training. According to the United States Census Bureau, 85% of our nation's persistent poverty counties, defined as 20% or more of a population living in poverty, are in rural America. Mr. Clyburn, our Democratic assistant leader, has laid out a formula for years, 10-20-30, which would direct and target federal resources to these counties and to these areas that would lift people out of poverty. And so we need to really understand where people are and make sure that our tax dollars go to those communities to lift people out of poverty. More than 1/3 of rural Americans and 1 in 4 rural children live in poverty in 2015. These are appalling. It touches our population that really needs help the most, including our children and our seniors. In 2015, more than 6 million seniors, now that's 15% of all people over 65 years of age, living in poverty. Even worse, while children make up just 23% of the population in the United States, they account for 1/3 of all Americans living in poverty. That's 1 in